to training as union contractors. I cannot speak and won't pretend to speak on behalf of non-union contractors. But what I can testify to this committee about is the labor management training ventures, the upgrade training programs, the union training centers in our unionized sector of the industry. Mr. Medernach gave you a brief overview of IMI earlier. That's only one of our endeavors or undertakings in the masonry industry. We know that there are other building trades unions, in fact probably most of them, doing the same or even more. Thus, we don't simply support provincial training programs, we fund them, we run them, and we make sure they're Saskatchewan programs. We invest in the construction industry in Saskatchewan. And that, to us, brings us to what is the only issue. We filter through everything in the background, and the number one, the only issue is a lack of skilled workers in this province. Legislation is not going to attract those workers. Jobs will attract those workers. The workers that we have trained for years and years and years that go to Alberta to work, don't go to Alberta because they like Alberta better. They're there because the wages are significantly higher. Those Saskatchewan tradespersons love this province as much as you folks do, I'm sure. They're in Alberta because that's where the work is. We would also, I'm just going to wrap up with a couple of questions of this committee. Abandonment. Please read our submissions on abandonment. Quite simply, I think you'll be surprised at our position on abandonment. Abandonment is to cure the problem of a contractor that's shirking its contractual responsibilities or trying to get backdoor on legislation. If we as a trade union ignore a contractor, don't represent our employees, fail to check up on job sites, and are generally negligent, quite frankly, we should lose them. We don't have a problem with that, and I know that might surprise some people. But what we don't want is legislation that protects employers from going underground for 3 years or whatever the term might be, and then popping back up and needing 55 workers. We would ask the following questions. Why have no trade contractors come before you? You've heard from the PCLs. You've heard from great big monolithic umbrella organizations. We're a trade union. Mr. Ottenson came as an individual. The carpenters, I believe, are scheduled to appear before this committee. You haven't heard from any of our contractors about a need for change in legislation. None of those contractors has come forth. None of the ones that we work with have come forth and said, bravo, thank you for Bill 80, because they don't need it. What they need is skilled workers, not legislative change. The members of this committee obviously must be intelligent, perceptive people to have gotten to where they are today. You have to be able to see behind the dog and pony shows that we all put on for you. You have to be able to get past the show to the facts, or you wouldn't be here. So, I ask this. If the merit shop organizations and others who represent all or mostly non-union employers come before you and say, good job, good start, thank you, this is a great way to go. With respect to legislation, and this is important, legislation that regulates the relationship between unionized contractors and their employee representatives, you have to ask yourself why. Let me repeat that because it's important. This is legislation that regulates outside their sphere of operation. Why are they coming before you and applauding the legislation? What are the motives to that? We have a vested interest in passing along our crafts to successor generations. Saskatchewan people. With over 100 years of contributions to this marvelous province, we plan to continue to grow with Saskatchewan and its needs. Can the same be said of those people who come and ask to get in the door now? I thank you and we welcome your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Aitken. Mr. Medernach. We'll now entertain questions from the floor for our guests. Mr. Yates is first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My first question has to do, in your submission here talked about that within Alberta that the all wall-to-wall unions were not, and I don't know if you use CEP or CLAC directly the name, were not meeting their skilled labor requirements that they needed to meet, training requirements. Could you?
Clear. Our evidence at this point is solely anecdotal, but if there is an interest in that on this committee's behalf, we'd be happy to do the research and provide you with some data that substantiates that.
Thank you very much. That was going to be my question. How would we actually be able to obtain that factual information in order to know or fully understand that that's not occurring?
We will commit and endeavor to get that information to you, the way to get that information to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. My next question has to do with, it's a question I've asked numerous presenters. In your experience where you have a wall-to-wall union situation or an environment where you have wall-to-wall unions, have you seen a difference in overall compensation and benefits to employees?
Again, Mr. Yates, thanks for the question, but I think that I'm in the same position as Mr. Ottenson. Anecdotally, absolutely. We go to jobs, we try to organize, we talk to workers in non-union environments and in other union environments, and so my evidence is solely anecdotal. There is a presenter coming up later in the program that may be able to help more on that, but the answer is anecdotally, yes.
Thank you very much. My next question has to do with you talked about a made-in-Saskatchewan solution, a willingness to work to solve whatever real problems there may be in the construction industry. Were you or the organization you represent, or to your knowledge, any of the trade unions in Saskatchewan approached with these problems?
No, Mr. Yates, we weren't approached with these problems by our contractors, or by the government, or by our contractor associations.
Okay. And then prior to the implementation of this legislation, pardon me, the introduction of this legislation isn't implemented yet, did you have any consultations? Were you, did anybody talk to you about the need for this from the government or from any representatives of the government?
No, we're in no different position than anyone else that's testified before you. It was news to us.
Okay, thank you very much. My final question is, you talked about the companies that you provide employees for, the contractors. At no time did any of them approach you with these problems. That's what I believe I heard you say prior to all of a sudden this legislation is before us.
Sure. If we look at the backgrounder, Mr. Yates, and we look at the perceived problems, the providing clarity and fairness, or rebuilding Saskatchewan's infrastructure, respecting the Constitution, the only one that our contractors have come to us with, and we're working with them as Mr. Medernach and I sit here, is a skills shortage. How do we get more young people trained as bricklayers? And that's why we've reached out to a number of communities, and that's what we're working with our contractors on. It's the only problem they've identified. And in fact, at the moment, we have 6, we've had to reach outside the province for 6, is it, roughly? 6 bricklayers at the moment.
Thank you very much. I have one final question on the issue of abandonment. You had indicated to us you're a lawyer, and obviously you practice labor law by your profession. In looking at this legislation on the issue of abandonment, would this legislation allow a company that has not been operating for a period of 3 years or more to simply bring forward a case on abandonment and the ability to get out of a certification order by the back door, I guess?
Subject to how a board is instructed or guided in interpretation of legislation, I'd say that that's a very realistic possibility. That's what worries us about this proposed solution. We think it's a quick fix. And we could look at solutions like what's in Ontario as an abandonment clause. And there have been cases in Ontario where the unions have been found to abandon their bargaining rights, and rightfully so, quite frankly. But overreaching in this regard, I think that your scenario is extremely possible to play out. And I think that's the exact harm we're trying to prevent. At least I hope it is.
Thank you very much. And one very final question. Under the present legal regime in Saskatchewan, have you and are you aware of circumstances where a union can in fact